years ago, I started in sim racing with no karting experience, no rich parents, and starting pretty late in my life. Now, I'm the championship leader at the Radical North America Cup. I can now say that I'm a successful real-life driver thanks to sim racing. Sim racing has exploded recently to the point where real-life drivers that used to refuse to believe it was useful are now finally realizing the power of this tool. After 10,000 hours of experience and currently racing in real life almost every weekend, here are my most important tips for you to improve your driving in sim racing in a way that can be 100% translated to real life racing. Because my expertise is competitive sim racing, I will focus on tips that apply to the most realistic simulators with a special focus to iRacing. I recommend iRacing more than any other sim because my real life experience confirms that almost everything you can develop in iRacing when it comes to driving technique will be incredibly useful in real life. Most tips will apply to other sims and even console games like Formula 1 or Gran Turismo, but they won't be my main focus. This guide is sponsored by the Motor Racing Checklist, my advanced online course for intermediate and advanced drivers, and Logitech G. Please stop thinking that in order to benefit from simulator before a real-life event, you have to practice on that week before the event, memorize the braking references, and try to match the same car on the same track. That's not how you're going to use the simulator to improve. Instead, what you're gonna do is develop your technique, develop your own muscular memory that you can apply in any track. On my last race weekend, I missed practice 1 because my car was broken. I missed practice 2 because my car was broken. I missed qualifying because my car was broken. I started the race in last and finished on the podium. How? It was not because I practiced in the simulator the week before. In fact, I did not practice in the simulator on that week. I went to Laguna Seca in my Radical and I did the race from last with no braking references, and I learned everything that I needed to do during the race. Now, and let me explain why. It's not practicing that week and memorizing the references. It's practicing the 5 years that I practiced before, developing my technique, understanding the car handling techniques that I used to find the limit as quickly as possible. I'm gonna teach you in this video how to get up to speed in record time. Like in literally one out lap, you can have an idea of how much grip the car has and already be just 2 or 3 seconds off the ideal racing lap times if you know exactly what process you're taking. So you're gonna never forget this. You're going to use the simulator to develop your own muscle memory, your own set of techniques, not to memorize braking zones. That's stupid. That's a waste of time, and the conditions in the simulator and in real life will drastically change. The conditions within the same track in real life can go from being super fast to being 3 seconds lower in a matter of hours because of how the track gets greasy, because of other tires with different rubber, laying rubber, and decreasing the grip that your car has. And you have to quickly adapt to these things. And memorizing your braking zones is not gonna be it. What you're gonna do is learn how to understand how much grip you have, and lap by lap, adapting your braking zones, adapting your lines and your entry speeds, and adapting what you do to extract rotation from the car without spinning or crashing. First, I will teach you the best, most effective process to reach perfection in any car track combination, in sim racing or in real life. The most common problem with all my early students is that their methods to find speed are often dangerous and inefficient. Here's what they do. They brake early, they go around the track doing the ideal racing line, getting a feel for the car. Second, they brake later and they see what happens. Then they brake later and they see what happens. Then they brake later and see what happens. And then they brake later, they crash, and finally they go back one step. This guessing game of braking later is what's making you take so many hours to become competitive in a new car or track. Let me fix that for you. The tires in a race car are able to extract 2 forces, longitudinal and lateral. Based on that, I've created a process called the 4 stages of the core technique. If this doesn't fix your driving skills, nothing else will. Here's how it works. Stage 1, testing the longitudinal grip. The longitudinal force, or longitudinal grip, can accelerate or decelerate the car. When we learn a new combo, the most important thing is the deceleration force. This comes before anything else. You need to test how much the car can stop. Get a feel for how fast the speed will go down. You should do that early and progressively. during the out lap and still far from what will be the final braking references for each corner. This is what I do in real life and in the simulator. It is simply the fastest way to build speed without crashing. The biggest reason people crash in real life as beginners is because they don't master the speed control, and because of that they become hesitant. Hesitating at 200 km/h before a hard braking zone is a big red flag. Stage 2, testing the lateral grip. After we learn and feel how much the car can decelerate, it's time to test the lateral grip the car can produce. And if you got in this part of the video, I want you to know that most people don't do this step properly. So if you do it, you will easily be already faster than 80% of the racing population. This is a promise. The lateral force starts happening as we start rotating the car. That's the only way we can activate these forces. If the car is too fast, the lateral forces won't be enough to keep the car on track, and you will go off track and crash. The only way we can safely determine what speeds we will be carrying through each corner is by testing the lateral grip. Here's the process, and I will show you a video where I do this exact same thing in real life, testing the grip in the rain on the formation lap of our race I won. Before you get in the corner, make sure your speed is low. Brake way before, get to a safe speed, and then start turning into the corner. As soon as you turn in, accelerate just a little bit, then add a little bit more steering. If the car turns too much and you start moving towards the inside of the corner, that means you can carry more speed than that on the next lap. Experiment with slightly higher and higher speeds until the car starts refusing to go to the inside of the corner. If you're still doing the same correct processes, a little bit of steering, a little bit of throttle, when you get closer to the ideal speed range of that corner, your car will start understeering a little bit. This exercise is called inducing understeer. At first, you overdo it, but when you get used to it, you will be able to do it in such a subtle way that most people won't even notice when they watch you driving. The reason we induce understeer first is that through understeer, the car has a predictable trajectory and won't spin out or do anything chaotic. We'll talk about oversteer later. If you can do this exercise in almost all corners and carry a healthy subtle understeer while doing the racing line, you will already have a good idea of how much speed you can be carrying through each corner. Now you're probably 5 to 10 km/h below the ideal minimum speed you should be carrying on a perfect lap. You can do step 1 and step 2 at the same time, since you're still testing your braking on a straight line and then you're testing the lateral grip during the corner. Stage 3, minimizing the understeer. On step 2, we induce understeer because it's safe and predictable, which allows us to pay more attention to the speed we're building up. The next step is to start minimizing that understeer and making the car rotate more and more and more until we start getting into oversteer territory. And we will do that by managing our weight transfer. For example, if at first you were trying 40% throttle while doing the understeer exercise, you had a lot of weight being transferred to the back of the car, increasing the grip on the rear tires, which are responsible for resisting that rotation and keeping the car pointing forward. On another lap, you could try less throttle, say 20%, and you will have less weight on the back throughout the corner, which will mean less grip on the rear tires and more grip on the front tires compared to the 40% example. Try less and less throttle during the corner entry until you reach a coasting phase, which means 0 throttle and 0 brakes. All that while continuing to test the lateral grip of the car. Depending on what car you're driving, coasting will already be enough to make the car oversteer, so it will depend on the nature and setup of the car. If the car continues understeering on entry with 0 throttle, then you should start adding a little bit of brakes. Start with what feels like 1%, just to see how the car behaves. Then try 2% brakes, and then 5, then 10, and so on. At some point, the car should snap on you and oversteer a little bit. What you need to know here is that if the speed is being maintained by the throttle as you turn into the corner, the car will most likely understeer. As we remove the throttle from the equation, we will turn into the corner with the speed going down, which means the weight is being transferred to the front tires, and the front tires become a lot more capable of rotating the car, which could lead into too much rotation or oversteer. Turning into the corner while coasting or slightly braking will make the car rotate a lot more than turning into the corner while gently accelerating. At this point, you will notice that you need a lot less steering to rotate the car, which helps you understand the power of the pedals in the car handling dynamics. And you should be carrying as much minimum speed as possible on that corner. Now, this is why this step is so important. When we start braking later and later, we will be closing down the distance between the braking phase and the cornering phase. And in an ideal corner, you will be doing the turn-in phase with the speed going down, which makes it a lot more difficult to handle if you're not prepared for it. Stage 4, combining the longitudinal grip to the lateral grip. This is where things become a lot more complicated and where the good drivers are separated from the slow drivers. By separating the lateral grip from the longitudinal grip testing, we are now able to fully understand the building blocks of a perfect lap. Now that we've found the ideal minimum speed ranges of each corner, it's time to finally start braking later. The later we brake, the higher will be the corner entry speed, which means we will be forced to do the corner entry while still decelerating. Now, by braking late, we are not able to induce understeer using the throttle, because if we do so, then we're going to be too fast and the car is going to understeer off track immediately. This is the moment where braking traces will matter more and more, where engine braking will matter more and more, and where your line choices will matter more and more. And finally, where the car setup will start to play a role in your lap time. Only then your setup will start to play a role in your lap times. People think that if you're not on the limit, you should try to change the setup to find the limit. No, you find the limit first and then you change the setup. Stage 4 is the beginning of high-level motorsports. If you can nail stages 1, 2, and 3, you can easily beat 90% of the drivers in the world. I have literally 50 lessons about high-level motorsports in the Motor Racing Checklist, my online course for intermediate and advanced drivers, and you get your money back if you don't improve. I have created concepts like the maximum rotation point, exponential steering, 3 tools for rotation, checkpoints, just to name a few. We have professional drivers, Formula 1 engineers, and esports drivers taking part in this course. Let's say this is the speed graph of an ideal corner. We accelerate, then we reach peak speed. The speed goes down very slowly as you are on the brakes. Then the speed goes down a little bit less slowly here. As you can see, this is not a straight line. There's a faster deceleration here, but then the speed starts going down more slowly because now at this point we're already turning and we're already transferring the longitudinal grip here to longitudinal plus lateral as we are trail braking to the corner, and then we transition and get back on power as we lose rotation. This is an ideal one. How do we get there? Well, stage 1 is doing this. You're going to test your braking before just to get a feel for it. This is stage 1. You're testing the braking, you're not testing your limits and maybe crashing. Then on stage 2, around here, stage 2, you're kind of maintaining the speed and testing the amount of lateral grip you can have through understeer in a safe way. And then as you get this better, stage 3 is also around the minimum speed, where we try to minimize a little bit the understeer by trying to add a little bit more brakes. But for that, we have to carry a little bit more speed, so you start doing something like this. And then stage 4 is gathering your experience, knowing exactly how much the car can stop here, knowing exactly how much the car can turn here, and then bridging this gap. This is where now not only here you are on the limit, and here you are going to start braking later, and then this happens. You start braking later, and then you have less time to mess because your speed is high. You need to decelerate, but your deceleration is causing rotation. So you are now matching the limit of deceleration with the limit of rotation and blending them. So you're gonna be on the limit throughout the whole deceleration process all the way until you get back on power, which of course you're also gonna be at the limit consequently after. You see, we're really not talking about exit in this video. I'm only talking about entry, because entry determines everything. If you don't have a good entry, you will never have a good exit. And a good exit is about preparing, it's about setting up, it's about rotating the car so that by the time you get back on power, you can commit to carrying as much speed as possible. Best tips for faster improvement in your driving. These are the best general tips for you to become more competitive in record time. When I joined iRacing in 2018, the first thing I did was to join a team. I had some fast drivers watching me and giving me some tips, as well as comparing our laps. This allowed me to not waste any time developing bad habits and just driving repeatedly without knowing exactly what was the next step. Since then, I've never been alone in sim racing. Always with a team, always looking for good people to grow together. And if I was alone this whole time, I would not have achieved anything I've done in my career. There's nothing more fun and productive than sharing a practice session or a race with a teammate. Ideally, find someone who's faster than you and use them as a carrot. Also in 2018, when I joined the team, I wanted to prove that I was dedicated to improve. I didn't care too much about the lap times, but rather how they change over the course of the week. What really helped my discipline throughout my sim racing career was knowing that every Thursday evening there was a league race to be done. I've always participated in leagues, and having a deadline, having rivals, having a proper schedule allowed me to be way more disciplined than I've ever been in my life. The bonus is that all that is just way more fun than driving alone in the simulator. So join a team and join a league with your teammates. Another very good tip, repurpose the stress and anxiety of racing. Especially in racing competition, it's very easy to get nervous, stressed, anxious, and finally frustrated with your performance in the races. My advice here is to think that if you're caring so much about it, it's because racing is important to you. So try to embrace and repurpose these feelings towards actual pure presence and enjoyment. Feel the adrenaline as if it's a good thing, as if it's a good sign. You're in the fight or flight mode with enhanced focus, better reflexes, and let yourself really experience the whole event. There's nothing better than that, be it in the sim or in real life racing. Let's talk about equipment. The equipment you use in your sim racing setup doesn't matter as much as you think it does. I'll focus on what's really important so you don't have to worry about unnecessary stuff. Ideally, you want a sturdy setup. The worst case scenario being an office chair with wheels, and the best case scenario being a full aluminum rig. What really matters is that you're allowed to break 100% of your pedal force comfortably without moving around, and that you can use 100% of your force feedback on your steering wheel without ripping it apart from your desk or cockpit. On my very first setup, I had an office chair with the wheels removed and supported on the side of my bed. It didn't look good, but it was sturdy enough that I got in the top 1% iRating in the planet. My point here is that as long as you can comfortably drive for hours without having things moving around, you're good. Adapt your cockpit to the strength of your pedals and wheels. If you have a potentiometer pedal where you don't need a lot of force to reach 100% braking pressure, you can use less sturdy rigs or even a chair like my old setup. But as soon as you upgrade to a load cell and you have to brake over 80 kilos of force, then a stronger cockpit becomes necessary. Wheel and pedals. Start with a Logitech G920 if you're on a budget. This is the wheel I used for many years, became champion in several leagues, started coaching, and learned the bulk of my driving technique. If you're willing to invest a little bit more, then my advice is that you get load cell pedals, not hydraulic, load cell, and a direct drive wheelbase with at least 11 Newton meters like the Logitech G Pro, which is the one I'm currently using. There's a lot of great equipment out there, and as soon as you get into load cell and direct drive territory, your driving technique won't be affected too much. Monitors or VR? I started with monitors, then I moved to VR, then I moved back to monitors. Here's what matters. VR headsets work fantastically with sim racing, almost more than anything else. The field of view is true to life, and the immersion is unbelievable. If you never drove in VR, you should try it at least once in your life to understand what I'm talking about. From a fun and immersion standpoint, VR wins. For a while. After you get used to it, that fun factor starts to become your normal, and you start noticing more and more the problems in VR. You can't use overlays reliably. You start sweating and getting tired if you drive for too many hours. You can't quickly check your phone. People can see your face if you're streaming, and VR tends to fail a lot more than monitors, which could destroy your online races. From a competitive standpoint, monitors win by a lot. The image quality is better and more consistent. You can add useful overlays and arrange them the way you want, and you can drive for many more hours without getting tired. When I moved from VR to monitors, I was 7,400 iRating, which was around the top 0.5% world ranking in iRacing. So you can still be competitive in VR. But when I did move to monitors, I did improve that tiny hair that allowed me to go further up to 8,500 iRating. And I stopped there because I started focusing on my real life career. I have triple monitors and I don't ever plan on going back to VR. Should you get a motion system? Motion systems come in many different formats, all of them trying to emulate the movements and G-forces that we get in real life. All of them fail in some way. There's just no way you can simulate G-forces in a simulator. And after trying many brands and systems, I believe they are not necessary for your sim racing practice and performance. Some of them can be fun and immersive, just like VR, but you will see that almost all high-level esports sim racers don't use motion systems. If you're willing to spend hundreds, sometimes thousands of dollars to get the extra immersion, go for it. If you set it up correctly, it will not hurt your performance and it will definitely be more fun. Software calibration. Imagine losing a second per lap just because your calibration is wrong and you have no idea about it. Listen, I have coached over 2,500 drivers and I can say that at least 100 of them had wrong settings that were costing them at least a second per lap. Here's what really matters in this topic. Pedal calibration is the most important part of your sim racing experience. Bad pedal precision, bad lap times. A good pedal calibration should allow you to brake 1%, 25%, 50%, 75%, 99%, and then 100%. In the motor racing checklist, I have a lesson where you have to do an exercise to brake to 100% and then go down 1 by 1% slowly to train your brake release precision. And of course, this becomes nearly impossible if your pedal is not set up properly. Calibrate your pedal according to your software and then make sure it's set up to be linear. In iRacing, this is called force vector, and it should be at the lowest setting if you have a load cell so that you don't distort a brake trace. Most cars will be incredibly precise to every % change in your braking inputs. Now you decide if this video deserves a slap on that subscribe button or not. I'm Almeida and my mission is to introduce, inspire, and educate racing drivers. See ya.